So we are very excited today to welcome two wonderful human beings as special guests for today's conversation. We have the filmmaker Ebony Bailey, as well as Nora Arrieta Fernandez, who's a fellow here at Harvard. So they're going to engage in a very critical, engaging discussion regarding the film, but also themes that we could take from the film. So before we get started, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background information for each of these two lovely people. First, we have Ebony Bailey, a Blaxican filmmaker and journalist from Central California whose work explores cultural intersections and diaspora. Her documentaries have screened at film festivals and forums in the US, Mexico, and Europe. Her photographs and articles have appeared in NPR, the LA Times, and Remezcla. She has been awarded the Samuel L. Coleman Scholarship for Emerging Filmmakers at the Haitian International Film Festival. And she was selected for the Tomorrow's Filmmakers Today program by HBO and Hola Mexico. She is currently completing her master's degree in documentary film at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. Her film, Jamaica y Tamarindo, has screened at many institutions and festivals, including the Pan-African Film Festival, the Fem Fronteras Film Showcase, the Hola Network at Google, and recently won the Audience Award for Best Documentary Short at the San Diego Latino Film Festival. And that award was actually just awarded last week, so congratulations. We also have Nora Arrieta, who is going to serve as our moderator. She's going to lead in the discussion with Ebony Bailey. Nora Arrieta Fernandez is a PhD candidate at Georgetown University. She's an ACLS Mellon Dissertation Completion Fellow and a research associate for the Afro-Latin Research Institute at the Hutchins Center here at Harvard. Her dissertation project, Bittersweet Poetics, Politics and Aesthetics of the Sugar Plantation in Contemporary Brazilian and Caribbean Arts, looks into works of art about sugarcane plantations produced in Brazil and the Caribbean in the last 3 decades. Through an interdisciplinary approach and the combination of textual and visual analyses, interviews and archival research, her project studies how in traditional plantation societies, artistic creation both reshapes and destabilizes discourses on commodities, nation, and Black citizenship. Nora is co-editing and co-translating with Mark Sanders of the University of Notre Dame, the poetry of Afro-Colombian poets Romulo Bustos and Pedro Blas Julio. She is a regular collaborator of the art magazines as Artishock. And her work is available, and I'll share in the chat a way to keep up with her and Ebony Bailey. So at this point, we'd like to pass it over to you, Nora, and Ebony to engage in discussion, and I'll share some links in the chat as the conversation goes on. Thank you so much for being here.
Now I can talk. Thank you so much for your introductions, Michael. I'm really glad to be here, whatever is here with you all today, and to have this conversation with Ebony after watching this wonderful documentary, Jamaica and Tamarindo. And we're gonna have also like some questions. You can write down your questions in the Q&A and I can go to them after we have some discussion with Ebony. And Ebony, good afternoon or good night. You're in Mexico City now, right? Yes, okay.
Yes.
So welcome today, and to start the conversation, I wanted you to talk a little bit about your journey as a filmmaker, right? Because you have been so far like a really successful filmmaker. So how was that you decided to choose film as a way of storytelling? Yes, because you are also, I know that you are also a journalist and a writer, but you have been like a really successful filmmaker so far. So tell us a little bit about it, about this journey as a filmmaker. Este viaje, ¿no?
Sí, muchas gracias. Thank you, Nora. Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's a real pleasure to be here, and I'm just really honored that I was able to share my work and also to be able to chat with everybody who's here. And how I started as a filmmaker, I think it does have a lot to do with my journalism background. I studied journalism in undergrad, and that started because when I was in high school, I always wanted to be like a designer, a web designer. And my class, my high school class, the journalism class, had a website instead of a newspaper because the high school couldn't actually afford to print a newspaper. And so I joined the journalism class to design like the news website, but they ended up putting me as a reporter. And so when that happened, I was really shy and nervous to like go out and talk to people, but then I ended up loving it. And I loved going out and interviewing people and telling stories. And so just from high school, I knew that I always wanted to do something in like storytelling.
Mhm.
And then I specifically more got into film after being in college for a few years and still dipping my fingers or dipping my toes into like digital journalism. But a lot of times digital journalism was just a lot of sitting at a desk, and I had a real desire to like get out there and meet people. But at the same time, I liked the technical aspect of, like just like playing with the technical stuff. So I did an internship at NPR, and they put me in the multimedia department, which was actually the photo department because multimedia for radio is photo apparently. And that's when I really got into the camera, and I discovered my love for the camera. And it was like the perfect combination of being able to go out there and tell stories, but also to play with like the techie side of the camera and play with like the editing and the colors and things like that. So since doing that internship, which was right before I graduated undergrad, I still wanted to get like more experience with photo and video and stuff. So I ended up working in kind of digital journalism for a few years, and then I got laid off from my job. Like that happens a lot of times in journalism, but it was actually kind of a blessing in disguise because it was a heavy desk job, and it was a lot of social media and things like that. And so I was able to finally like come to Mexico and do a certificate program at UNAM, which is called the Diplomado, because I had applied to the master's the first time and I didn't get in. So I instead signed up for that program. And when I did that program, I did my final project was my first film, which is called Life Between Borders, and it's about Black migrants in Mexico. And the final project could be about anything, but I chose that film that subject because it was something that I had just read about that was happening in Mexico at the time. This was 2016, so there were a lot of Haitian migrants arriving at the US-Mexico border. And at the same time, it was like a subject that was really kind of personal to me, and just the sense of being a Black body in Mexico, even though we don't share the same experiences. I'm not a migrant, so I don't share that experience, but the shared experience of being a Black body in Mexico was something really personal to me. And then after I did that film, I kind of fell into it, if that makes sense. I uploaded that film on Vimeo, expecting like my mom to see it and nadie más. And then it ended up getting picked up by Remezcla, and Michael even shared it too with like his contacts and where he was going to school back then. And it just like ended up being way more difundido, like way more diffused than what I thought it was going to be. So it was kind of just like falling in like a natural evolution from print journalism to photography to then video. And after doing that short documentary, I applied for the master's program, which was in documentary film. And that's where I did Jamaica y Tamarindo, which is actually my thesis project. So that's kind of my story. So I feel like it's like an evolution in that sense.
Very like a journey as well, no?
A journey.
Resonate to you. And you just finished with the next question, because I'm sure that most of the audience is thinking about how you came up, to this topic of Jamaica and Tamarindo. Yes, how did you discover, the African roots of these two plants that are like so central to the Mexican culture, and you think like, you thought like, okay, I'm going to make a film about this. Besides that, you have to submit a thesis project, of course.
Yeah, besides that part, that insignificant part.
Yeah. on the side.
Yeah, so I know for my thesis project, I knew I wanted to do something on Afro Mexico because I had already done something on Black migrants in Mexico. So I wanted to do kind of something on Afro Mexico and the Afro root that's been in Mexico for centuries. But at first it was like this giant, like I just had that general theme and then like a bunch of different ideas and like maybe I could do this angle or maybe I can combine this and this and that. But as I was researching for Jamaica y Tamarindo, which at the time wasn't called Jamaica y Tamarindo yet, I was talking to my friend Leona, who's one of my really good friends, and she's in the film. She's the one with the braids. And we were talking about food because we both really like food and we're both vegetarians. So we talk about food a lot. And she said, did you know that La Flor de Jamaica, which is the hibiscus flower in English, is from Africa? And I said, no, I did not know that. And I didn't even put two and two together that Flor de Jamaica and hibiscus were the like, it's never like, for me, Jamaica was just Jamaica and then hibiscus was just some random flower. But and so when that happened, I kind of went into the rabbit hole of looking up the history of Flor de Jamaica and hibiscus and all of that. And ever since she told me that, I knew that I really wanted to include like the Flor de Jamaica aspect in my film. And poco a poco me fui como, little by little, I like centered that. And I also like, in my second year of the master's, or maybe it was the end of my first year, I was talking to one of my classmates who had, who kind of knew people who worked like for this centro, this like Secretaria de Cultura, this like cultural sector of the Mexico City government. And he was like, oh, you know, they're giving out grants, small grants to projects, and it could be like a workshop or an art project or anything that has to do with Afro populations and indigenous populations in Mexico City. And I know that you're working on something with Afro populations for your thesis, so why don't we try to apply? And so then they helped me really center, and I told them about all these different ideas, and I told them about Jamaica, and then they said, oh, you know, actually Tamarindo was also from Africa. And I said, oh, I didn't know that. So all of these like little facts I was like learning as I went, but he really helped me kind of center the title. He was the one who came up with the title Jamaica y Tamarindo, and then we both came up with the title Afro Tradition in the Heart of Mexico. And that's how, kind of from finding that title, that's how I came to center it on Jamaica y Tamarindo. And the documentary, as you've seen, it's not really like about Jamaica y Tamarindo. They're more so used as metaphors to talk about the visibility and the erasure of Afro heritage in Mexico, because just like the Afro population in Mexico, La Flor de Jamaica y Tamarindo are two ingredients that are really associated with Mexico, but not many people, at least in Mexico and in Mexican American communities, not many people know that they're actually from Africa. And it goes the same with the Black population in Mexico. It's a population that's been in the country since the beginning of when the country was founded, and not many people know about their existence. So I kind of use those two plants as a metaphor to talk about this deeper issue of Afro heritage and Black heritage in Mexico.
Yes, that's something that I saw while I was watching the documentary that I found very interesting, because at the end you have like these two parallel narratives, you know, like you have, and actually so something that I really like it, like in aesthetic terms about the documentary, is like at the beginning you have Jamaica and at the end you have Tamarindo, so they help you like to frame the narratives of the lives of these Afro-Mexican people. So I found it like very interesting in terms of how you were narrating the stories in the documentary. So, and that takes us like to the next question, which is like, how did you meet these people, these Afro-Mexican people that you are presented in the documentary? What did they tell you about their journeys, about discovering their Afro-Mexicanism? And maybe we can also connect with something else that I wouldn't see that it's, actually something explicit in the documentary, I feel, at least for myself, which is this connection between Blackness and indigenous community in Mexico, right? So, which is, we can also, this is a really long question, but which can also take us like to this idea of what is Blackness in Mexico, right? Because we also have like this connection on how different Blackness can be like in every Latin American country. So first, can you talk a little bit about the how did you met the people that you are presenting in the documentary? What did they tell you? How happened this encontro, estos encuentros, ¿no? Cómo pasaron, ¿no? And also comment a bit about these intersections of Blackness and indigenous community that we can see in the documentary as well. And I feel that also like central for Blackness in Mexico.
Yeah, so all of the people in the documentary are my friends, but I also met them at like different times. I met Leona, the one with the braids, and then Seinabu, the cook. I met them when I was actually doing my first documentary, which was about Black migrants in Mexico. And Seina is actually in the first documentary too, so she's in both of my in both of my documentaries because she
I
has a
saw
lot of
that.
good things
I
to
saw
say.
that. I was like one of these people that
Yeah.
important for the narrative.
Exactly. But yeah, I met them when I was doing the first documentary, and I feel like I've met just in general a lot of the community that I know in Mexico City, at least like the Afro community, is either directly or indirectly related to the people I met in the first documentary.
Okay.
um and so that's just like the first documentary was really formative for me, not just professionally but also personally in that sense. And from there, I met Chai, who's the musician, through Leona because she had invited me to one of her exhibits, and he was there playing guitar, and so she introduced us. And then from there, I also met Suri because Chai and Suri are brothers. Suri is the one who identifies as queer. And then Marbella, I met through Chai and Suri because Chai had invited me to one of his exhibits, and Marbella was also there, and we both presented at that exhibit as well, so we got to talk to each other. So everybody also knows each other in the documentary, and everybody's connected. But the reason why I chose those specific people too was because of how they represent diverse like experiences of Blackness in Mexico. Like you have some people from La Costa, you have some people from Mexico City. Seinabu is the daughter of an African migrant. And so you have all of these different representations of Blackness that I really wanted to try to explicitly like portray in the film. And then at the same time, I also chose them because of the diversity of their interests. So Seinabu's the cook, and she was the one who really could show the connection between the continent, Senegal in this case, and Mexico within food. And then Leona is a poet, so a lot of her poetry you hear in the documentary. Chai and Suri are musicians, and so a lot of their music is what you hear in the documentary. And Marbella just had like a really sweet story about her personal relationship with Jamaica y Tamarindo. So when she was talking to me about it, I had already filmed most of the documentary, and then I asked her like, oh, would you want to be in the documentary? And so that's also why. So it was kind of two things of their diverse experiences of Blackness, but also their diverse interests and kind of like the narrative that I wanted to say in the film. And then to answer your second question, yeah, I think there is definitely, especially in Mexico, like a very explicit and beautiful connection with Afro-Mexicanidad and indigeneity.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that I really did try to kind of portray that solidarity and that union in the film, especially in the parts where Suri is talking about like the traditions and Oaxaca and things like that, because I wanted to also make explicit that like these communities have always been together. They've always been in similar luchas, and I think it's really important to like at least represent them in a union and in solidarity, and not just represent one part and not the other, because I do think that the Black experience in Mexico, or one of the Black experiences in Mexico, is really, really tied to indigeneity. And even with Seina, she's the daughter of an African migrant, but her mom is indigenous too. So even with these like newer generations of Afro-Mexicans, there still is a tie to indigeneity, and I think it's really important to represent that.
Yes, I really like that about the documentary, because now with all the Black movements in Latin America, we have started like to have this conscious or ser conscientes about Blackness, but sometimes we also like dejamos de lado. We are not talking about how much indigenous or indígena is Blackness in Latin America. I mean, I feel it's the same, for example, for my family in Colombia, no? And I was living actually in Oaxaca for a couple of months. So I was very interested in these people, Zapoteca people, for example, that looks like real Black. So I was like, okay, which is Blackness, no? When we are looking at this community in Oaxaca or La Costa Chica. And I feel that your documentary is like adding a lot of different and really interesting like layers to that discussions, not just in Mexico, but in Latin America, And
well, one more thing I wanted to mention about that. because I think it's important to mention, sorry,
No,
that in Mexico, like officially to be considered indigenous by the state of Mexico, you have to speak the language, and so that kind of erases a lot of indigenous people out of the picture, because it kind of puts people in the box of mestizo and all that, and a lot of these Afro-Indigenous communities aren't included as indigenous because they don't speak the language. And so I feel like state-wise, and also maybe it's also internalized, that a lot of these communities don't identify with indigenous, even though there is a strong indigenous connection. And so that was another reason why I wanted to explicitly mention it in the documentary, because I feel like there's a lot of ways that the official government kind of erases indigeneity too, and that kind of permeates through the communities.
that's true, and it happens. It happens also in Colombia. My grandma, she was an indigenous woman, no? But I identify as a Black woman, but I was raised by her. So I felt that all, like, you know, like el conocimiento that I have of my ancestors is because of an indigenous woman. So that's very interesting. There is another question that is related with what you just have told us about this beautiful community that you discovered while you were like, or that you met before you started to work on your films. And it's like, how is, like, I mean, can you talk about the Black community in Mexico City? You have talked something about it, but can you tell to us? I mean, I was like really interested. Like, I was trying to imagine how was, like, okay, how was it when you arrived to Mexico City, you know, like as a Black woman? I mean, how did you started to meet other Black people, you know? Can you tell us about the places of this, for these Black people? I mean, these Black spaces maybe in Mexico City, which is a huge city, and I was there, and I'm trying to imagine like this Black Mexico City. So can you tell us about it?
Yeah, I think that's funny, because today I just had a meeting with some new coworkers, and one of them, we were saying, we're and things like that, and I was saying, oh, I'm in Mexico City, and then one of my coworker who's Dominican, they were like, oh, la única negra de la Ciudad de Mexico, and I was like the only Black woman in Mexico City, and I said, no, there's more of us, I promise. But it is kind of, it's not to say that there isn't a Black community in Mexico City, because there is. I wouldn't say that there are like explicitly like Black neighborhoods like you find in the US. But for example, when I got to Mexico City, it took me like a few months before I really found like the community. And I feel like that's kind of a struggle for a lot of Black people, even Black people who are born and raised here, that it takes them a while to find the community, but the community is here. And I think that's what's really beautiful about kind of the community in Mexico City, even though there's not like a central like physical neighborhood and things like that. There are like pockets. And I also think that, at least from my experience, like I've met a lot of Black from Black Colombianos, people from Africa, people from other parts of the Caribbean and South America, but I've also met a lot of Afro-Mexicanos, and I feel like a lot of times, especially in like events or like fiestas, which hasn't really happened in the pandemic times, that's when they all kind of come together. And so in that sense, it's been beautiful, and I feel like there has been a lot of that kind of sense of community, especially with like putting on events and things like that. And then with my own experience, yeah, I think that like, especially for those first few months, and just feeling like, oh, like seeing Black people on the streets, because I do remember very, very explicitly like seeing at least one Black person like every time I went out, and like saying hi and or doing the nod and things like that. But yeah, I think it was also interesting for me being like a Black Mexican American, because on one hand, like I'm racialized. I don't really get racialized. I don't get associated as American normally when people see me. I've gotten Haitian a lot, especially in the I've also gotten Colombiana, Cuban, but I get mostly Haitian. But then once it comes out that I'm American, especially being a student and stuff, I am treated differently. So in that sense, there is a privilege of being from the US and having a US passport, is that, I do get treated differently. And I also think that saying I'm Mexican American, people are also like, oh, paisana, like, oh, now you're more of one of us. And I think that that's interesting, because when I hear about, for example, my non-Black Chicano friends who come to Mexico City, it's like the reverse experience, where first people think that they're like one of them, and then when they say, oh, I'm from el otro lado, then it's like, oh, that's why you don't speak good Spanish. Whereas for me, it's like, oh, that's why you speak good Spanish. So I feel like the association of me being a foreigner, and then when they find some sort of cercanía, that's when they start treating me better. But I do think that, like, you know, your background, you're like, I'm also here because I'm a student, and being from the US and being Mexican American, and that all has to do. It's a weird feeling of like being a foreigner, being looked at as a foreigner, but at the same time not being a foreigner because I'm Mexican American. So it's just like all these different layers. And I do feel like in Mexico, I do feel very Afro-pocha, if that makes sense. Like a lot of traditions that I grew up and I associated with Mexican, I've actually learned that are more like Mexican American since being here. So that's also been an interesting experience.
It's very interesting because I'm in the Q&A, and there are some beautiful comments. You have to read them. People just love your film. I'm gonna choose one of the questions. Darby Lee says, my question is, what parallels do you see between the experience of Afro-Mexicans in Mexico and the experience of Afro-Mexicans in the US? I think you can connect that with what you just said, right?
Yeah, I think that for me, I guess it's kind of hard to talk about because, for example, the experience of Afro-Mexicans that I know in the US is more so like my experience and the experience of Blaxicans, who are more people who probably have like a non-Black Mexican parent and then a Black American parent, or maybe like a Black parent from somewhere else. Whereas like Afro-Mexicans who migrate from Mexico to the US probably have a different experience than I do. And I've only seen that like in documentaries or maybe just like meeting people here and there, but it hasn't really been my experience. And I feel like with my experience particularly, like, and also growing up, I grew up in Central California, which is very heavily Mexican American. And growing up and kind of just people seeing me as just Black and not knowing that I have a Mexican side, there was like a lot of the bullying, especially when I was younger, bullying in Spanish, people not knowing, or people just assuming that I wouldn't understand them. And so there would just be like, you know, those insultos and things like that. And me, when I was younger, always having to appeal to like them saying like, oh, but I'm Mexican too. Oh, but I'm not all the way Black. Things like that kind of sucks because it's also like, oh, I'm trying to distance myself from my Blackness, but at the same time, I want people to recognize my Mexican heritage. And it just feels like, especially when I was younger, that I couldn't just be Blaxican, if that makes sense. And now I'm way more like confident in my identity. And if people don't want to see me as that way, I don't really care. I'm not going to try to appeal to people who don't see me as I am. But when I was younger, I feel like that was an experience that I had. And that's actually an experience that I've seen with Afro-Mexicans from Mexico, who, especially like in the younger years, most of the people that I've talked to, especially in the film, also mentioned that in school they had the same experiences of being seen as like a foreigner, or, you know, getting the bullying and people not believing that they're Mexican. And I feel like that's kind of how I connected with them, even though we have different contexts and different experiences, even experiences in that, you know, I have a non-Black mother and a Black father, and like the descendants of people who've been here for a long time, descendants of Black people who've been here for a long time. And so those contexts are different, also being from the US than being from Mexico. But when they told me those stories, especially like of people, their classmates, their peers, not believing that they're Mexican, that's something that I really, really connected to. And that's actually why I wanted to do this documentary, because I feel like it is something that even people, Black Mexicans in the US can relate to, especially if they grow up in like a Mexican American community.
Of course. So let's gonna come back to maybe to comment a little bit more about your career as a filmmaker, and I'm really interested on knowing what is next for you now, Ebony. I mean, because you have done 2 documentaries which are wonderful. So you are just about to finish your master in documentary. So I really wanted to know if you are also like interested maybe in feature films or fiction, or what is next? I mean, what do we have to expect from you now?
Great question. I'm really into documentary. Like, I'm really into nonfiction storytelling. I feel like that's just been my interest for a long time. And I don't immediately, I don't see fiction film like in my immediate future, but I'm also not close to the idea. I think it would be kind of cool to dabble in that world. And I just finished the music video for Chai and Suri, which was also kind of the two people, the brothers in Jamaica y Tamarindo, which was still kind of docu-style, but it wasn't a documentary, so I feel like that's dabbling in. Right now, I'm working on a film that's about, it will probably be another short film about Blackness at the border, and I'm applying for a grant for that, so wish me luck. And then also I just started working for this political org called Mi Gente, doing videos for them. And I think that actually is we were talking about like scripts for ads and things like that. And so that's actually piquing my interest also more for just fiction and like script writing and like making fictional scenarios, even if it's just for an ad, but that's like piquing my interest. So yeah, those are like the next steps for me right now. And continuing to screen Jamaica y Tamarindo.
Yes, I saw that. I mean, one of your films was in the Pan-African Film Festival, right? Isn't it? Like, it was
Jamaica y Tamarindo.
Jamaica y Tamarindo was the one, yes. So that's related with my next question, because you are a Black woman, a Black filmmaker in Latin America right now. So, and we can, I was really happy when I was invited to talk to you, because I've been very interested on Black films in Brazil, mainly made by women. So I really wonder how you see like this theme of Black women or Black filmmakers in Latin America right now. I mean, if you have some kind of connections with them, since you are based in Mexico City right now, if you have had like the opportunity to start to have the discussion with these other filmmakers, Black filmmakers in South America. And also, I'm gonna have like a really long question. The second question is like, how it is to do film? I mean, what about production? You know, what is like to make film for a Black woman filmmaker? I mean, where did you, when I watched Jamaica y Tamarindo, I saw like the logo for the City of Mexico government. I was like, okay, some of the money came from there, but how was it? Like, you know, like the production, which is like such an important thing for filmmakers. So if you can talk a little bit about these two things together.
Yeah, I think I am pretty fortunate that I have been able to meet other Black women filmmakers in Mexico and also from other parts of Latin America. I got to, thanks to grad school funding, I got to participate in a un taller, a workshop about Black film, Cine Afro in Cartagena, in Colombia.
Oh,
and so,
yeah.
Oh, see? I was gonna ask from where in Colombia are you from? Yes, I went last year, and from there I got to meet a lot of amazing Black filmmakers from different parts of Latin America, and a few Black women. One of my dear friends, her name's Risette. And she's working on a film in Panama. She's Panamanian, called Cuscu, which means natural hair in Panamanian slang. And I think it's like supposed to be an insult, but she's kind of reclaiming the term. And so that film is probably going to come out probably next year, maybe a little longer because of the pandemic. But it's also going to be in a film festival going to happen next week. It's called the Afro Latino Festival, that I'm actually helping to organize as well. And so I can send Michael the link, and he can send it to y'all in like an email so that you can sign up, because that film's going to be like a teaser for that film's going to be there. Also, there's this Black woman from Brazil called Everlane Moraes. She was also in my workshop too, so I know her as well. And she has a film also in the Afro Latino Film Festival. And she's a really great filmmaker too. And then Medhin, I can't say her last name because her dad's from Eritrea, and I don't want to butcher her last name. So she did a feature film that's called Negra, and it's about being a Black woman in Mexico. And her film is also going to be in the Afro Latino Film Festival next week with my film. So my film's gonna open up for her film. Yeah, and she's been like we always try to like give each other tips or like pass each other grants and things like that. And so to answer your second question, yeah, I feel like the production side is, at least for me, it's been very autónoma. It's been me with just like getting my camera and editing on my computer. The first film was just like me, my camera, and my computer. And in the second film, I did get like the small grant from the Mexico City government. It didn't pay for everything, but it did really help me out, especially in terms of like getting a crew. Like I was able to pay 2 sound people and an assistant producer and things like that. And then I just shot it and edited it myself. So it's still very like hands-on for me. And I feel like, I don't know, I can't ever imagine myself being the director that like just directs other people, because I'm so used to doing everything myself. But I do think that I think that at least for being a Black woman in the film industry in general, in an industry that's like dominated by white male and the white male gaze, I do think that in order for a lot of us, or circumstances of a lot of us who are trying to get in this industry, is that we do have to just like start on our own at some point and just like grab our camera, even if it's our phone, and edit and things like that, because we're not just handed these opportunities like other people are. And so I feel like for me, poco a poco, it's been like, you know, more and more, there's more and more, I guess, I want to say recognition, but I feel like there is more and more, I'm also just learning too, like how to navigate the industry and how to like fund these productions. So I haven't really like mastered it or anything yet. There's a lot of grant applications that I've only ever gotten that one grant. So I feel like that too is just like, it's just like, it's a lot of hustling, I feel. And I feel like sometimes it's just like, you know, sometimes you have to know when you want to take a break, and like know when you want to like maybe take a step back from the hustling, because sometimes there's a lot. And especially during the pandemic, I've definitely like taken a step back, at least for a little bit. I feel like I'm just now starting to pick up again. But yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to know like your boundaries and limit this.
That's true. And I was just to start to close our conversation, because you should be tired as well. I was wondering, like, how do you see, I mean, like, does this Black cinema film, I mean, in Latin America, compare with any experience of Black filmmakers that you have in the US before, in the States before? And also, just like, as a final question, like, how do you imagine yourself in the future? Are you gonna be in Mexico, or are you decided to be like always in this kind of frontier, sí, como en esta frontera, con un pie aquí y el otro allá, no? Like being back and forth between Mexico and the US. So if you can talk about that, just like to close this wonderful conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I think that I'm like thinking about your second question, and I forgot your first question. Can you repeat the first question?
I was saying that it is very interesting, the fact that you have like an idea of the Black filmmakers in Latin America. So I was like, are you also like updated in what's going on here in the States and
in the US?
There are any similarities? I mean, something like that. And the second question, which was like, okay, are you expecting to be like this kind of nomadic or nomada filmmaker, you know, between the States and Mexico all the time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like I haven't had as much experience with filmmaking in the US, because I think my formal start of making my first documentary was when I was already living in Mexico. But at least from what I've kind of participated in with like workshops or like these screenings and things like that, I think that in that with Latin America, I feel like there's a similarity in the sense that Blackness has always been like either underrepresented or represented in like these underrepresented kind of like under the white gaze. Even now in the US, we see a lot more like Black bodies on the screen, and we see a lot more of like these stories, but then who is still behind the camera? It's still like, you know, a lot of non-Black or white like screenwriters, white cinematographers, directors. You know, the only like major reference in Hollywood that I can think of, who was like a Black woman film director, is Ava DuVernay, and I can't really think of like anybody who's like on that level yet. And I feel like, you know, and there has been like a there has been like I guess like a construction of like Black Hollywood or Black film in the US, but I still feel like there's a long way to go. And I feel like in Latin America, it's just like the scale is just so much more worse, if that makes sense. Like, you know, like I see kind of similarities with US and Brazil, and that there's also like this community. And even in Colombia too, I just was in a film festival in Colombia that was about Cine Afro. Kunta Kinte?
Kunta Kinte, sí, from yes.
Sí. And so I see that stuff there, but I still feel like, you know, I think it's like a combination of just like, I don't even know if it's a combination, but I feel like, you know, a lot of times when we think of Latin America, or we think of like the Latinx community, there is like this general thing of like, oh, but there's no racism in Latin America, it's classism. And I feel like that gets, even though there is, and there's heavily like institutional racism, institutional segregation, that kind of negligence of the existence of racism, plus the actual racism that exists, just makes it so much more harder for like Black and Indigenous populations to build things, and to, I don't want to say get their foot in the door, because I feel like it's way more valuable to kind of build your own instead of trying to enter the door, if that makes sense. But I feel like it just makes it like that much more harder. But I do see that, especially like in Brazil, in Colombia, and even in Mexico, like there has been, like I know a few other Black and Afro Mexicanos that are also making films, and even people who are starting to make fiction. And so I think that that's cool. I do see a lot of documentary about Black people in Latin America, and I don't see that much fiction, which I feel like is like happening. There is actually there's a filmmaker in Colombia. He's from Chocó. His name is Rayson Velázquez. He was in my taller too, and he's doing a lot of exploration with the fantasy genre and Afro-Colombianos, and I think that's like super cool. And so I feel like as more Black people in Latin America start to enter this field, that there's going to be a lot more exploration of what Blackness is on film, that goes más allá del documental, because I feel like el documental also in Latin America and in the US too is still kind of very extractivista, like extractivist. And so I think that like when it's like portrayed in Latin America, in the US too, but in Latin America, especially through like the white mestizo gaze, a lot of times it is like in terms of looking at Black populations in terms of subjects and not in terms of community or in terms of empowerment. But in terms of like people, when they see themselves on the camera in Latin America, sometimes it's just like them being filmed for a documentary, not even knowing they were being filmed for a documentary. So yeah, that's still, I feel like that like anthropological subject onda is like still really strong in Latin America, and I feel like it's still kind of not accepted by the Black community, but just like in general accepted for white and mestizo people to be making films about Black people. Whereas I feel like in the US that it still happens a lot, but I feel like there's a lot more questioning. And I feel like that's in part because of the whole like negligence of, oh, you know, we're all mixed in Latin America, so we all have this raíz, and not really questioning what the mestizaje is too as a project of whitening itself.
Whitening, yes, that was very interesting, because actually last time that I was in Bogota in a film festival, in Afro-Colombian Film Festival, I had the same sense about this extractivism of the documentary that white mestizos were doing in Colombia about Afro-Colombian communities. And also like it's very like focused, no? It's like always related with folklore or things or rural communities, you know, but this diversity of Blackness, for example, the experience of urban Blackness is always like neglected or erased. Iboni, do you have anything else that you want to say, that you want to share with us, or?
I just wanted to say that I'm really grateful for everybody who's here. It's such an honor to be here, as I said before. Sorry if I like went on, especially on the last question, but yeah, I really appreciate you and your questions and your commentary. And I'm so happy to know that you're from Cartagena. And I appreciate everybody who's here. And I think that kind of going along with what Michael said in the beginning, when every year when we come up to Latinx Heritage Month, like really questioning, these constructions of mestizaje and really centering kind of Black, Indigenous, queer experiences and other experiences that exist in Latinidad. So that's all that I have to say for now, I think.
No, thank you so much, Giovanni. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone that was here today with us. Ebony, please read all the messages, the beautiful messages that people wrote for you in the Q&A. And I'm gonna let you with Michael. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for attending. Appreciate you all. Thank you so much, Ebony, for sharing your insight and documentary with us. Thank you, Nora, for leading a wonderful conversation. A couple of things I want to share before we head out. One is the film, it will be available till Sunday. So I will share via email the link to Jamaica y Tamarindo. You will have until Sunday to watch it. So please feel free to share it with loved ones or rewatch it again. Also, if you are a Harvard affiliate, I'm very proud to say that the DVD will always be available through Harvard libraries now. So you can check it out anytime. So congrats to Ebony, you have a documentary that is now immortalized in Harvard. Also, we're gonna send in the email different links to people who are in the documentary. So people that Ebony mentioned, for example, as well as musicians, they're gonna be, we're gonna share their Instagram handles so you can follow them. And then also we're gonna link you to Nora's work as well so you can read some of the things that she's done. And then if you have time tomorrow, we'd love it if you could come for our event tomorrow with Yaneli Farias. But that's all we have for today. In a couple of days, we will upload this video with English and Spanish subtitles so you could watch it and share very widely with others. So thank you so much. We appreciate you all. And that concludes our event for today. Muchísimas gracias. Les quiero mucho.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Gracias.